So today we're going to talk about planning your projects. And this is something that came about just looking at projects that I've been working on, talking to some other people that are doing small projects, side hustle projects, and maybe just personal things. Maybe they want to build their own, their own little website, or they've just got an application that they want to build, scratch an itch. Maybe it is something that's one of those applications where you build it and you think that maybe eventually it would be something you want it to turn into a side hustle. So it's, you want it to be nice. You don't want to, you're not necessarily going to push all the way to it being like a commercial software endeavor, but you want to build a full featured product partially because you're going to use it. So you want to have something that, as you're going through, you're building features that are going to make sense to you when you get done. And I think that there is a need for some sort of project management to that, even when it's a single, developer working on it. And that's what we're going to talk about in this presentation. More specifically, we're going to start off with just talking about what is the small projects what are some examples and what would sort of define a small project that we want to have as our focus of this presentation. And the next question is the obvious one, is why would you even bother with managing this? Why does project management actually have any value in this kind of a project? We're going to talk about some important considerations as you are implementing this or putting this in place, and then choosing a tool, because it doesn't hurt to have a good tool to help you get this thing done. And then sort of wrap up talking about post-mortems and how to use this to get better, since that's one of our goals, building better developers. Well, this is going to be a way to do so. So small projects. As I mentioned, normally when I think about these, and I think if you sort of just sort of mull over in your mind, what are some of the projects you've worked on that you would consider small or tiny or one-off side hustle kind of projects? Then there's some traits that are going to be the same across all of those. Most often, like I said, they're probably like a little personal thing that you want to do, or maybe you and a buddy, got together and want to build. Maybe like a little tool or utility that you need for work, that you just find yourself doing something a bunch and you're tired of it. So you say, I'm going to automate this process, or I'm going to build a script or a little application to help me get this job done. Another thing about them is they're usually done by one or two resources. You don't have like a big development team. It's usually like just maybe you and one other person. So from that, you don't really have a lot of communication needs. You're not answering necessarily to a manager where you have to document what you've done every week. You're not sending it out to some board to sign off on the requirements. So you don't need like a big requirements and design document. You don't need to have maybe like a user manual or a technical spec or anything like that. I mean, you may want to build some bits of documentation, but the stuff you're doing is really more documenting it for yourself, so that if you come back in 6 months, you know what the heck you did. You're not really having to communicate this out to a user base or key stakeholders or anything like that, because normally that one or two resources are the key stakeholders. Usually with these projects as well, it doesn't matter as much, but you're probably not doing them full time. This is not like your 40 hours a week kind of project you're working on. I mean, you may get a week off, maybe you take a week of vacation and you go work on it. But normally what you end up doing is you're going to be doing a few hours a week, maybe as much as 10, 15, 20 hours a week. But since this is more like a side hustle or a little side project, it's not your main job. It's something you're trying to get done along with all the other tasks that you've got on your weekly schedule. And usually they have these kinds of things. It's pretty important to being these small projects is when you have a set of clear goals. There's a problem or a couple of problems that you want to solve with this. You're not just building software to build software. And we do that sometimes. And I think of cases where, maybe we build out a little website and the next thing you know, we're just sort of adding another page and another feature and a little this and a little that. And you get those little things, those like tinkering kind of projects where you're putzing around with it, and maybe you do use that application or that project or that website or whatever that you're building occasionally, and then it just becomes like a Frankenstein's monster or something, because you use it and then it's like, oh, hey, it'd be cool if I could do this, and you just tack on a feature. And then I use it for a while, it's like, oh, I could do this, and you tack on a feature. So these small projects, what I'm thinking of is something that's more of a defined goal to say, at least I'm version 1. So it may be something that you're going to end up tacking stuff on year after year and over time, build some huge application. But along the way, you're going to have these little projects that would be, we'll call them like versions or releases. So you do, well, this is what I want to have in version 1. And so you go do it. So those are the clear goals I'm thinking about. So it is a defined project and not just loose, side coding. So the next important thing, you talk about this project, well, what's the value in having some sort of a project manager? I mean, you probably think of like a PMO, project management office, and there's all these people and they're shuffling papers and checking boxes and, creating all of this documentation and paperwork around a project that as a developer, you probably don't care about very much. You may to some extent. I mean, you're feeding the beast. You're putting in estimates, and you're putting in the hours that you worked, and you may even be creating tickets and things like that. But you may look at it and say, why do I care? I just want to get in and code and solve a problem. I don't really want to report up to management how we're doing. Well, whether it's a big project or small project, one of the important things that is, I guess, a side effect or a direct outcome of some of the things you do is, one, you're going to set some goals, which are maybe essentially requirements of some sort, but you probably have, beyond just your technical requirements, it's things like, I'd like to get this done this quarter. I'd like to get this done this year, something like that. So you have some goals around it as far as the problem you want to solve, and probably a time frame and some requirements as well. If you're focused from a sort of project management point of view, it does push you to create milestones. I talked about having like a version 1 release. Well, along the way, it helps to have some key markers, key milestones of things that you have accomplished, of goals that you want to reach, little goals along the way to get you to that full application. And it may be stuff like, let's say it's a website, it may be just a login screen and a user registration, and maybe a home page or a dashboard kind of page, adding some reports, database connectivity, things like that. They're all very good milestones to just help you keep your thoughts straight as far as the tasks and the work that you're doing. Another nice thing about it is that it does provide accountability. On a big project, that's a whole purpose, is that you've got these project managers in. They're there to help drive forward the project, and also to have some accountability where you estimate, it's going to take this many hours. I'm going to get it done by this time. These are the features I'm going to have ready to go. Here's the quality metrics we're going to hit, or whatever it happens to be. And then that's what the project manager is they're just there to sort of come back behind you and say, hey, you did a great job, or you didn't do a great job, or what kind of job are you doing? And even as when you are project managing yourself, that still is going to help. I mean, it's sometimes hard to think of you being accountable to yourself, but that is exactly what it sets up. And if you're in a small team of 1 or 2 people, it helps even more so then, because it gives you accountability to that other person. They're going to ask, how you doing? And from all that, it gives you a way to measure success. It's, hey, I want to get this done by next week. Well, when you get to next week, you'll know, was I successful or was I unsuccessful? Did I fail in this? Where am I at on that? And of course, integrated with all of that is it's going to help you develop estimation skills. If you sit down and try to put together a little plan for what you're working on, then you are almost by nature and almost by definition going to estimate the time it takes you to get some of this work done, whether it's hours of development or elapsed time. Like maybe, I don't know how many hours I'm going to work on this week, but I'm going to guess, I'm not guess, but I'm going to estimate that I'm going to get this task done at the end of this week. This other task I'm going to have done by next week, I'll hit this milestone by the end of the month, so on and so forth. So this helps you immensely, and it is very useful for personal projects, but those estimation skills, obviously, we're asked to do that in our daily jobs all the time, so it becomes very important for career development as well. So assuming we buy in now, we agree on what a little project is and the value of project management, there's some important considerations. The first one is overhead and utility of you project managing your project, managing your project in this way. And by that, you want to keep it simple. If you look again at like a project management office, you've got usually bunches of projects going on, lots of different PMs working on all these projects. You've got all these reports and all this data that's feeding all these dashboards and so on, so forth, yada, yada, yada. What you want, we go back to that prior, so that prior slide is really you're looking at setting goals. You want some milestones, you want some accountability, you want to be able to measure success. Well, that means you don't necessarily need like a whole lot of complicated reports. You don't need huge, detailed line items of work that you're doing. You can keep it fairly simple. And that takes us to the next point, which is very important, is whatever process or whatever tool you end up using, I think you want to have in the back of your mind, asking yourself, will you follow through with this? If you set up or just, state or whoever, say, okay, this is a process I'm going to use to manage my project, it's going to be very important for you to think about, is this something I'm really going to do? Is this something that, looking at my history, that makes sense that yes, I will do it, or I'm kicking myself in the butt enough this time to force myself to do it because I know I need to. So you don't want something that's got it's such a headache or overhead or anything like that, that you'll say you're going to do it, and then a week later you're not going to do it. It's just too much of a pain. And then the key to this is that little and simple processes and procedures and tools is going to be better than nothing. So if you can position it so that you're not spending a whole lot of time, and especially if it's sort of natural for how you develop things and how you think of things and how you plan to get your project built, then that's going to be the best solution, because you want it to be, you want it to just flow with what you're normally doing. You don't want it to be something that like just yanks you out of your process and that you're sitting there doing it the whole time. You're like, why am I really doing that? If you're constantly questioning yourself, probably not a good solution. But forcing yourself a little bit is far better than having nothing. If you get to the end of the day and you don't really have a way to, at best you've got maybe a gut feel of whether you were successful or not, you like to do something better than that. It's nice to have some metrics. And as you're building this, sort of goes to that follow-through piece. Is this going to help you have some sort of accountability, or is this going to be something that's going to be really easy for you to ignore? And now, honestly, if you look at ticketing systems, there's a lot of companies that is their biggest challenge, is getting their staff to use a ticketing system. You've probably all been there. You've been in a company where there is a ticketing system, and officially, you aren't supposed to do any work without a ticket. If somebody asks you to do something, they create a ticket or you create a ticket, and you assign the work, the time that you spent to that ticket, and then you set its status and all that kind of stuff. However, there's a lot of places where it's really easy to ignore too, because maybe the user community has direct access to the IT staff. And so rather than create a ticket, they just pop their head up over a cubicle and say, hey, can you help me with this thing? It takes you 5 minutes. So you say, sure, and you help them and you move on, and then the ticket never got created. So it's sort of easy to ignore. Now, if your boss is there, comes by every so often and says, hey, what were you doing for that 5 minutes? And there's no ticket, then he can smack you on the butt and say, all right, let's go out there and create some tickets. And that's sort of how it ends up happening. Now, for yourself, when you're doing your own little project, it's very easy to either, in the same situation, either just not create it, not properly build out milestones and tasks or create tickets or line items or whatever. But the other thing you can do is that you got to watch out for yourself is where you build this really awesome plan of milestones and tasks, and then you don't actually touch any of those things again until you're like done. You have like 20 items, tasks to do for release, and the only time you ever touch those tasks again or even look at them is when you've completed them on that release. That doesn't really add a whole lot of accountability to yourself. It's better than nothing, but you'd rather have something that's like tapping you on the shoulders on a more regular basis. And then another really important consideration when you're setting something like this up is avoiding rabbit holes and being sidetracked. Particularly if you start looking around at tools related to this, you can easily find some stuff that's cool, that's interesting, and the next thing you know, you've spent a couple hours playing around with something that you really just didn't want to do. You end up spending more time thinking about and considering the project management piece than you do writing the application. So you want, again, this goes back to, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it low overhead. Now, we talked about selecting tools. Well, let's look at some bullet points to think about this. Most of these are the kinds of things we have discussed several times as far as just any tool evaluation, but it doesn't hurt to have our own little checklist for this one as well. First one is price and free options. Depending on how much you want to commit to a project management process for your little projects, you probably are going to want to just find something. If there's a tool out there, you want to find one that's preferably that's free. Since you're using a small project and there's one or maybe two developers, you're more likely to find a free option because you're just not at that level where you hit a pricing tier. So there's a lot out there. You may want to commit to one. You really like the tool. It really does things that you need it to do. And so, just make sure that the price is something that, that isn't going to break the bank, or something where you go in because you had a tax return, you had a little extra money. So you go out and buy it. And then, when the renewal comes up, you don't have the money and you've spent a lot of time investing in a product that you realize you can't afford it over the long run. It's good to think about, and this is more specific to these tools, is this something that is going to be useful across multiple projects, or is it more of like a one-off kind of a solution where you, and a lot of the free tools do have that. They are limited to the number of projects that it supports. Some of them you're lucky and it'll support like one project at a time, so you could archive one off and you can create a new one. Some they're not that good. It's basically you would have to just always have something under a single project, and your reporting in that can get a little bit convoluted. So consider what is it that you're working on, what is the goal out of this, and then make sure the tool fits that approach, and that you're not in a situation where you don't want to paint yourself in a corner where you have a tool that's pretty cool, but now you either have to pay a lot of money to be able to really access your data, or throw it out and start all over again. As always, it's a chance to learn something new. Whatever tools that are out there that you're looking at, there may be some things that are being considered by your employer, or that you have customers that might be interested in. So spend some time working on this. You run a project through with it. It'll allow you to really, kick all the tires and evaluate this tool and decide whether it's something that makes sense. It's maybe something you can put on a resume that, hey, I've got solid experience. I understand how to manage projects with this tool, with this application. Availability is it may be more of a personal thing than it is to all of you. But I find a lot of these tools, particularly these project management, this area, if I'm trying to do my own little personal project management, it has to be a tool that is very available and accessible to me. So if I'm working, because I'm going to be working on this side project in a lot of different situations. I may be at a desk and have a desktop. I may be on a laptop traveling or something, I may be sitting out at a pool and have a little iPad or a phone or something like that, have a tablet or a phone or something connected or maybe disconnected. So I want to, it's a challenge to find a tool that is going to be accessible to me in at least the majority, if not all of those situations. Because if you got like a really nice, say a really nice desktop application, but you can't run it on your tablet, then now you're limited. That means you're always going to be, you can only use this when you're working on your laptop. Now, if the project is something where you're never going to work on it other than your laptop anyways, then it may be a non-issue. But that's where, make sure the availability, the ways that you can access that solution are going to fit the process that you have for developing the product or your style of coding, things like that. You don't want something, again, you want something that like flows with you and not something that yanks you out of your, out of your groove as you're going through and getting stuff done. And then with this one, really want something that helps you, like drives you to plan getting the project created, getting the product created, getting that project done. Because we're doing bits and pieces of development on it, we go back to what we originally talked about. You don't have a lot of resources. You're not necessarily working on this full time. So that means that it's probably going to be done over a longer period of time than normal, maybe weeks and months, maybe even years. And you want something that allows you to keep track of what it is that you've done, that you want to do, maybe even future enhancement ideas, things like that. So you want something that's not just, that's more than just a way to record work done on the project. You want it something that's going to allow you to do some scheduling a little bit and maybe even hold you a little more accountable to creating those milestones and requirements and tasks so that you think through what you're doing. So that it's a little bit more of that, measure twice, cut once kind of approach where you've thought through it, you've put some stuff out there and okay, here's some tasks I need to do. And then you're going to know what the cost is going to be because, wow, to get those tasks done, it's going to take me 100 hours of development. All right, well, I'm committing myself to 100 hours of development over the next 10 weeks or whatever that happens to be. For some tools, I wanted to throw, besides just throwing some ideas out there of some considerations, some suggestions of, here's some tools you may like. First two, Trello and Asana, are very similar. The nice thing about them, of course, we have Trello.developerpreneur.com where we've got our little board of work that we're working on, tasks that we're trying to knock out. And Asana is the same way, as they both work on essentially a Kanban board from the Agile approach, where you've got a backlog, you got something you're working on, and you got things that have been done. The nice thing about them is you can create a ticket with a few words, maybe a sentence or two. You can add more information. You can put estimates to it. You can assign a user to it, which is great if you've got like a 2 or 3 developer team. You can move stuff around. You can show status. You can throw some notes to them. You can attach stuff to it if for some reason, if you want to really document and keep up with what you're working on. Sometimes in both those cases, it's a good way to have like almost like a notebook that you're working on, so that you can put all the, maybe commands and command line stuff that you've done related to that ticket. You can put links out there of sites that you've looked at as part of getting that thing done. So they allow it to scale up or scale down as needed. Another one that's really easy for this is Excel, or just name your favorite spreadsheet. Is just pick a couple columns and you have maybe a status. You may want to put an estimation column, and then you've just got a note description or something like that. It could be as simple as just one column, just description. So you've got these line items of things that you want to get done, and then you can, whatever you want to do, you can sort them, you can prioritize them, stuff like that. So you could actually use Excel or your spreadsheet choice fairly easily. And the nice thing about that, jumping to that last bullet, is that there's a lot of templates out there that are Word templates or Excel templates or PowerPoint or Pages or Keynote or Numbers or whatever. There's all of these templates out there that are built for little project management things. That may be exactly what you want. If you've got Access, Microsoft Access, it's got some. There's a lot of tools out. If you look at like SourceForge or something like that, there's a lot of places where you can find a little application that'll set you up for this. Evernote is similar to like a Trello or Asana. Evernote's a great place to throw stuff because you can do it a numerical, bullet list kind of thing, and just do bullet points. You can have different notes for different milestones and different releases. It's essentially a pencil and paper option without having to do it with pencil and paper. And Evernote being the way it is, you could have access to it on all of your devices, and then you can just sync it across all devices, and you're off and running. You can always update your project management piece. And if you want to step it up a little bit, Jira's is real nice. It has a lot of features that allow you really to, blow it up into like a nice enterprise solution, or you can keep it pretty simple and keep it down to essentially, here's my task, and assign it to yourself. The nice thing about Jira above some of those others is it has a lot of like timestamps and reporting and things like that that are just, they go on behind the scenes, and it allows you to get a lot of the reporting and a lot of the metrics out of this stuff without having to enter a lot of the data yourself. It just stamps stuff and keeps track of things for you a little bit. And it also has tools to do time tracking and that. But that's just one of an example. There's a lot of other time tracking and project tools out there once you step up to that level. So what are some common features, talking about these tools, some things you're going to want to have in order to just make it easy to get this thing done so it's not driving you batty? First is drag and drop, being able to just, got an item that you're working on and drag it from, working on to done, or from the backlog to I'm working on it, and things like that. So you can just quickly, in a few seconds, update status on what you're doing and do your project management overhead. As I mentioned, I brought up on a lot of those suggested tools, you want to have a quick or short way to be able to create a milestone in a task. The best thing is if you can create tasks or milestones, however you want to do them, but then drag and drop them under each other so that you can very quickly do roll-ups, which would be a milestone and then the tasks related to it. That's awesome. Or having sub-tickets or something like that. That makes it really easy for you to plan out at a little more of instead of at a task-based, but at a milestone-based approach to plan out what you're doing. You want to make sure, again, as I mentioned, of the tools that I suggested, you want to be able to have something that it allows you to enter data or put attachments or links or all that kind of stuff, but doesn't require it. Especially things like time estimates and time worked and things like that. There may be things that are a lot of this administrative kind of stuff that it's like a nice to have, and maybe you'll do it, but maybe not. This goes back to, is this something that you're actually going to follow through and use? Well, if you've got something that allows you to take more complete advantage of it, but doesn't require you to, that's going to be, the better choice. Because then if you start doing it and you realize that's just too much overhead, you don't feel like doing that, you hate it, whatever, then you can bail out and the tool still says, okay, that's fine, you don't have to. It is very useful with these things. It's like, I talk a lot about not needing a lot of reports, but I think the one report or output that you are going to benefit from a lot, so you want to have, is some sort of like a quick look summary dashboard kind of thing. So you can look at it and see, here's maybe how many tickets are in this project, how many have I worked on, or how many have I completed, or there what's behind. If I put in estimated completion dates, how am I doing against that? That's going to be obviously very based on the kinds and amounts of data you want to put into the process. but it is very useful to have something that at least shows you, yep, you're on schedule or you're not. Or as part of that, here's what you should be working on, or the next thing that you wanted to work on, so that you're not spending a lot of time looking at the application and saying, okay, well, now what's next? It gives you essentially a to-do list, so that you don't have to do a lot of thinking as you do those switches from working on your regular work to jumping in and working on this side project. It may seem counterintuitive when I'm talked about, keeping up with it and accountability and all of that, but you do want to have a way for it to allow you to easily catch up on the data entry portion. So if you go work on stuff for a while and you forget about the tool and you don't update tickets, and now you've completed 10 of them and you want to move them all to completion, if you have to individually go to click into each one and then set a status drop bar and save and all that, you're probably going to end up just not using it. If you ever get behind, you'll just say, screw it, it's too much work, I'll deal with it next time. So you want it, even though it does sort of it works against the idea of keeping you accountable and keeping you up to date, you do want a way for it to allow you to quickly catch up on stuff. So when, if you fall behind on it, is a way for you to easily just say, okay, now I'm back up to date and I'm going to be better going forward. I'm not forced into some long drawn out process. It's such a headache that I say, forget it. I'm just not going to catch up. And then it may go without saying, but it's one of those things you should always think about. Look for integration with whatever other tools you have, particularly if you use Eclipse or Visual Studio. There are a lot of integrations out there, and that may be exactly what you need. Is it's just another button or menu item or view or window or something like that can pop open, and then it allows you, and maybe even there's some some integration between the coding tool or the IDE and whatever it is that you've got there. So maybe it tracks automatically for you, tracks the time you're working on it, stuff like that. And again, we've looked at some of those tools in the past, so always keep that at least in the back of your mind, and check on both sides. The tool you want to, the project management type tool that you're getting, and the tools that you use as part of your development, is to go look at their integrations, and you may see that they work together and save you a lot of time and headaches. So now we go through a project and we've, let's assume that we've done this. We've gone through and we've created tasks and we've moved their statuses as they need to be, and we've done the project management piece to the level that we want to. When you get to the end of the project, this becomes very valuable. You can do your own post-mortem on your little project. And I highly recommend, regardless of what you do, that you do that. When you complete a project or get, I hate to say it, or you bail out on a project, because sometimes we do that. We get 90% of the way in and we don't really run it all the way out to release it or something like that. But we don't really, and maybe it doesn't necessarily die, but it becomes inactive and we're not working on it for a while. At some point, it's going to help you with that to look back and do a postmortem. Look at, how did I do? Hopefully there's some reports or summaries, and it may just be that dashboard, but look at that and figure out, did I estimate properly? Did I underestimate? Did I overestimate? If my estimations were off, was it sort of across the board? So I can easily just add a modifier and I know I'm going to be correct moving forward, or there's some tasks that I estimate better than others, things like that. Spend a little time and take some notes and set some goals for the futures. Look at what you did and what you did right and what you did wrong, and try to get some output of that to help you be better. No matter how many projects you've done, I just about guarantee you will always have something that comes out of a project that you can learn from, so that you can be better. So take a look at that, spend some time, and then set a couple of little personal goals or notes, so that you avoid some of the pitfalls that you've made in the past, or that you can focus on to become better. Of course, we talked about, if we selected a tool and you get to the end of a project, did that work? Is that something that tool really helped you? Did it work against you? Did you end up not using it? Look at all of the worries that we had, the considerations in selecting a tool, and let's make sure that it fits. And if it doesn't, we can throw it out. maybe we spent a lot of money on it, but at least it's not good money after bad. So, which goes back to that whole pricing idea. But when we get into the project, let's make sure that it did what we wanted it to. And that may be some of the notes. Maybe it didn't, but it wasn't really the tool's fault. It was our fault. It was the tool writing the code. So, we make some changes there and say, all right, I think this is going to help me. So I want to, take some notes. And these are some things I'm going to do to be better and to utilize that more in the future. And all of that goes down to, so review what you did and then make adjustments so that next time, and it may be on current projects, it may be on future projects, because whatever you learn out of this probably is going to help you in your day job, your career work, as well as any little side projects and that you do. Probably you'll get a little bit of both. You'll get some things that are general skills and techniques that you're going to learn. And some are going to be things where you understand yourself better in the little projects that you do, and you will be able to do a better job at knocking those things out. Because let's face it, there's going to be more than one. I don't know any developer that goes through their career and they just have this one little side project that they ever work on. All of us have something we work on for a while, and then we see another shiny object, and so we work on something else. Or there's a new language that comes out, and we have a project that makes sense to do in that language, however it is. So learn from it, review, adjust. As I said at the beginning of this slide, you're going to be able to learn something. So at the very least, when you get to the end of a project, take a look at it and get at least one thing that you can say, all right, here's how I'm going to improve in some way, form, or fashion. At least one, so that you've always benefited from becoming a better developer point of view from doing that project. So some sort of wrap up thoughts on what I wanted to get across to you guys. First off, in these little projects, we are the customer. We are the key stakeholder. So although you're going to maybe have some considerations based on who you work for, or maybe some jobs you want, stuff like that, at the end of the day, though, make sure that you're choosing an approach, a process, and tools for you, these are things that you will use or want to use and will take advantage of. Look at best practices, and you're going to find, and it's against any software project, and you're going to find that design, scheduling, some sort of project management often shows up as a best practice. And if you're doing development for a company, it's almost always going to be a part of it. So taking this approach to building your project is good practice in a best practice. It's going to allow you to be more comfortable doing this with others when you're very comfortable doing it for yourself. It allows you to build a habit. But with all this, make it work for you. Don't go to some big overhead based on, you don't want to practice doing something that's for that company, and then as soon as you leave, it's too much headache. You're not going to use it again. It's different tools. Or just for yourself, you turn a project that you were going to spend 100 hours on into a project that you spend 250 hours on. So you want it to be pretty easy. Again, you want it to hold you accountable to what you're doing, but you want it to work with your flow. Do what you can to avoid like vendor lock-in. This goes back to that whole, there's some really good free tools out there, but they may not allow you to get your data back out. So, keep an eye out for things like the ability to export your data or print results or summaries or reports or something like that. So you have at least a way to take your data and go on to something else without having to go back to their site all the time. So that being said, I want to open up for questions and comments.
Hey there, Rob. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more on how project management tools motivate you. You touched on it with the accountability and the ease of use, but say you want something that's going to kind of tap you on the shoulder, send you a notification or something. Hey, this milestone is due. Can you talk on that a little bit more?
Yeah. The best thing is actually your last suggestion. If you've got something that sends you daily, or a lot of them will do like a weekly report
Mm-hmm.
It'll send you essentially a snapshot of how you're doing, and you can look at it. And some of them will even you can set stuff up so that if you're let's say this is going to be due in a day, that it sends you a, hey, this is going to be due in tomorrow, so let's make sure you're working on it.
I see.
Or something that's like, hey, this has gone past due. That's really nice. I will flip. Let me see if I can flip out of this real quick.
I just thought about it as you were saying. Some of these even have like an RSS feed you can tap into or something of that sort.
Yeah. And like, for example, I use Jira and have used it for years and years now. The last couple of years, what I do is every 2 weeks, twice a month, I do a sprint. So I do essentially 2 weeks sprints, because I do to the 15th and to the end of the month, every month, 24 sprints a year. And then with that, I've got a backlog of stuff I'm going to do, and which is a whole bunch of different stuff. And I'm regularly creating tickets for that. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time to do that. I can, probably spend about 15 minutes per sprint creating tickets, and then, closing the prior one out and opening the new one. And then this is what I look at. I work from this all the time. So I have this up, and then whenever I'm looking for something to do, then I've got stuff that I'm working on, and I mix and match it. Basically, because I work for myself, it does make it a little easier that way. I mix and match my work and my side projects. And then looking at stuff, the nice thing for me, it's accountable, because like I'm at the end of a sprint. I have 0 days remaining on this. And it pokes me to see that I've got, whatever this is, 10 different tasks that have not been completed yet. And I'm basically at the end of the sprint. Actually, I guess it ended yesterday. I just haven't forwarded this. But that'll be part of what I do as part of the accountability. Before I actually complete this sprint and create the next one, I'm probably going to try to knock out 3 or 4 of these things. So it's going to allow me to, when I get done, I'll get a sprint report that says, hey, at least you got something done. And so that, even without the reminders, but just in this one, it's got as much, it's as much about a habit that I've built about building these sprints. And then, it would bother me if I came back to it and it's like, oh, I create a sprint, and 6 months later, I come back and say, oh, I had this sprint that I never finished. That kind of thing. But there's, like I said, the ones that, and there are a lot of tools out there that will do some time tracking or things like that will send you, and a lot of them, it's an option that you can send it daily, you can send it weekly, you can send it monthly, something like that. It's just a little email reminder that says, hey, you were going to work on these things. They didn't get done. If you have like a Trello board or Asana, then that's really good, because you just get yourself in the habit of having that up. And then you just, whenever you flip over to that tab or that browser window or whatever, then you can see, hey, here's some things I was going to work on. And that's just going to remind you that that's stuff you wanted to get done. You can go really low tech, which I also do, and do pencil and paper. This goes back to creating yourself a task list and put stuff on your list. And if you do it in a way that it's not necessarily calendar based, so you say, I've got these 10 items I'm going to do, and then you just have that sitting on your desk, and then you cross them off or check them off as you get them done. Then whether you get them done today or tomorrow or next week, you've still got that that item out there in front of you, saying, sort of poking you, saying, hey, get me done. And then, like I said, like Jira and stuff like that work out well. If you've got something that's just been especially if the ticket has the creation date on it and you've left it in the backlog. Like I've used this, I think, example before, is I had a ticket I created for myself, a task of converting vinyl to digital, because I had gotten a USB turntable and I had a bunch of records. And so what I wanted to do was get all those things, run those things through and convert them to digital so I could listen to them on my phone. That ticket had a created date and a due date. And I think it went 3 years before I actually got it done. But it was just sitting there in my backlog, and it would just like bug me and bug me and bug me. Obviously, not enough that it got done in less than 3 years, but it was something that it was just like, okay, I got to get this thing done because it's driving me insane. So that's some of the accountability as well. And it depends a little on your personality, but find something that works best for you. All right. So wrapping it up, what did we learn? Project management is for any project. There is a value in it, no matter what your project is. There's a value in thinking about what you're doing, estimating it, scheduling it out, and trying to get that stuff knocked out. Just like requirements, just like design, it's a piece of that. Although a lot of places that have a PMO, project management is about paperwork for it. It's just a lot of paperwork, a lot of documentation, a lot of boxes to check. And I know I don't want to disparage those people because there's a lot of value they bring, but I think a lot of developers view project management as just more paperwork, just more administrative red tape. But the point of it is it's to help us get better, to estimate better, to not let stuff fall through the cracks, and to get the stuff done that we want to get done or that we need to get done for our projects. If you do this, if you start adding a little bit of a project management layer to your projects, you will get better at it. It is going to add skills that are very valuable as you progress in your career. Early on, your first 3 to 5 years, you may not need it very much, but as you start getting into management roles and architect roles and things where there needs, you're actually helping people estimate and define and design projects, these are skills that you're going to find very valuable. You're going to be glad that you have them. You can start today with this. Whatever you're working on, even as I just sort of mentioned, you can start with paper and pencil. You can go with very low-tech solutions. You can go with a spreadsheet. You can go with Evernote. You can just write some stuff down on paper and use that to start laying out what you want to do and when you want to get it done. As always, I appreciate your time. Any of this stuff, you want to send some comments, you can always send us stuff at info@developernoir.com via email. You can go out to our Contact Us page on the Developernoir site. On Twitter @Developernoir, we've always got stuff going out there. You can respond. You can direct message us there. You can go out to Developernoir Facebook page and join the conversation there, or start one up on this presentation. As always, this is just to help all of us get better, to help us think through what do we do, how do we do it, and how can we get better at it the next time we do it. That being said, go out there, become a better developer, and we'll talk to you next time.